Welcome back to the Bethlehem Story, and I'm going to be reading from Genesis chapter 35 from verse 16. This is the first mention in the Bible of our subject, Bethlehem. Then they journeyed from Bethel. When they were still some distance from Ephrath, Rachel went into labour, and she had a hard labour. And when her labour was at its hardest, the midwife said to her, "Do not fear, for you have another son." And as her soul was departing, for she was dying, she called his name Ben-Oni, but his father called him Benjamin. So Rachel died, and she was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is, Bethlehem. And Jacob set up a pillar over her tomb. It's the pillar of Rachel's tomb, which is there to this day. And what we see here, the first mention of Bethlehem, is actually in a minor key. It's about the agonizing death in childbirth of Jacob's beloved first love and second wife, Rachel. She dies there, and as she dies, so she brings life, she brings forth a son. And here we see that tears are wept and grief is experienced in our town of Bethlehem. And then we see that Rachel is buried on the way to Bethlehem by the side of the road. And actually her tomb is still there today, just to the north of Bethlehem. Actually, Rachel's tomb, which is visited by many pilgrims, many mothers who want to pray about family problems or want to pray about having children. Rachel, who had originally in her story not been able to have children and said to her husband, "Give me children lest I die." Now she hears many women from many different backgrounds, Jews and Muslims and Christians, have gone over the centuries to her tomb to make that same request, really, "Give me children lest I die." And so Rachel's tomb is still there today, and you can visit it. But she's buried by the side of the road, and that was so unusual in a culture where burial really mattered. And most of this clan get buried in the family cave at Machpelah, but she doesn't. She never makes it to that resting place. She is buried by the side of the road, and she becomes a kind of a patron saint of in-betweenness, of never really arriving, of dispossession, of statelessness. And actually all the way through the Bethlehem story, we're going to experience people who know what it is to never really arrive, to have their story cut off in the prime of their life, in the flower of their youth, if you like. And ultimately our Lord Jesus, that is going to be his story as well. And so in Rachel, we can identify with anyone who has had to seek asylum, who's a refugee, who's had to be buried far away from where they were actually from. And all the way through the story of Bethlehem, we will experience this. Even Jesus himself, when he's born there, will have to flee for his life, go to Egypt, seek asylum there for a while, be a stateless person, a refugee. And so we will see that this sadness, this suffering, this disconnection is part of the story of Bethlehem right from the beginning. And Jeremiah will pick this up, won't he, in Jeremiah chapter 31, where he'll say Rachel is weeping over her children as they go into exile. And then Matthew will quote this in his account in Matthew chapter 2, when Herod's soldiers come and kill all the infants as part of the Christmas story. And he says Rachel is weeping for her children. And so we see the pain, the tears, and actually those are still part of Bethlehem's story today, because actually Rachel's tomb is just there to the north of Bethlehem, but you can't get there from Bethlehem now, because this great security wall has been built, this wall that kind of divides the Palestinian community from the Jewish community on the other side. And it's a great symbol of division and mistrust and anger and pain and fear. And it's made it very difficult for local Bethlehem people to actually access Rachel's tomb. Now it's quite a bone of contention in the local area, and it's been a flashpoint for fighting, and even sons on both sides have been killed. And so what we read here, and I just want to read a quote from Stricker in his book, Rachel Weeping. He says, Rachel is the age-old symbol of the grieving mother. Her children are dying, Palestinian and Israeli alike, and Rachel continues to weep for them. Rachel cries, and so do Israeli and Palestinian mothers. Inside the tomb, women wailing with tears over pregnancy and childbirth. Outside, mothers sobbing uncontrollably over the death of their sons. And so we see Rachel weeping and Bethlehem as a place of pain and grief and loss. And that is an important part of the Bethlehem story.